Hey, welcome. Today we're diving into the work of Carl Rogers, a psychologist who really truly turned the world of therapy on its head. We're going to explore his groundbreaking idea, person-centered therapy.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that tension, that gap between who you really are on the inside and the person you feel like you have to be for everyone else? Well, that exact feeling, that's right at the heart of what we're talking about today.
To really get this idea, you first have to understand the man who came up with it. And trust me, he was a bit of a rebel in the psychology world of his day.
So Carl Rogers, he wasn't your typical shrink. He actually grew up on a farm, and he was fascinated by how things grow, naturally. And that really shaped his entire worldview. See, while most psychologists at the time were looking at people like broken machines that needed to be fixed, Rogers had this really radical belief that people are actually inherently good, and that we all have this natural pull towards growth.
And to get just how big of a deal this was, you have to look at the timeline. Psychology had already had two big waves. First, you had Freud, the first wave, digging deep into the unconscious mind. Then came the second wave, behaviorism, which was all about observable actions and changing them. Rogers helped bring in the third wave, humanistic psychology. And this wave put the person, the whole person, and their potential right back in the spotlight.
And at the absolute core of his theory is this beautiful idea called the actualizing tendency. Think about it like this. A seed has everything it needs inside of it to become a mighty tree, right? It just naturally pushes towards the sunlight. Well, Rogers believed that every single one of us has that same built-in drive, this deep innate motivation to grow, to heal, and to become our fullest selves.
Okay, so if we're all wired to grow, why do we get stuck? Why doesn't it always happen? Well, Rogers' answer was both simple and totally profound. It's not about us being broken, it's about the environment we're in. We don't need fixing, we just need the right conditions to thrive.
So how many of these essential conditions did he think were needed for this growth to happen? Just 3. That's it.
He called them the core conditions. And these aren't complex therapeutic tricks. They are basically the psychological version of sunlight, water, and good soil. They're the fundamental things we all need to feel safe enough to grow.
So what are they? Number 1 is genuineness. This means the therapist isn't some blank slate hiding behind a professional mask. They're a real, authentic person in the room with you. Number 2 is acceptance, or what he famously called unconditional positive regard. And number 3 is understanding, which is all about a deep, empathetic listening, trying to see the world through the client's eyes.
Now this one, unconditional positive regard. This is the real game changer. Just think about it for a second. Most of us grow up with conditions of worth. We learn that we get love and approval if we're a good student, if we're not too loud, if we don't show we're upset. UPR is the total opposite. It's this deep, profound prize of a feeling where you are valued for who you are right now with all your flaws. And that is what creates the safety for someone to finally be themselves.
And when a person gets to experience this kind of environment, something really incredible starts to shift on the inside. It's like they begin to tune and trust their own inner compass again.
This right here, this visualizes that feeling we talked about at the very beginning. Rogers called it incongruence. It's that painful gap between our real, authentic self and the self-image we've built up to please everybody else. The whole goal of therapy, then, is to help close that gap, to help our self-image finally match up with our real experience. That's a state he called congruence, or just wholeness.
And that leads to this other massive shift, moving from an external to an internal locus of evaluation. What does that mean? It means we stop looking outside of ourselves for permission and validation. We stop asking, what does everyone else think I should do? And we start listening to our own gut, trusting our own experience as the best guide for how to live our lives.
So what does this journey actually look like in real life? Rogers didn't see it as a quick fix. He saw it as a process, a journey, with some pretty clear stages of change.
Yeah, it's definitely not like flipping a switch. Rogers mapped out this whole process. You can see people often start out really defensive, feeling like all their problems are somebody else's fault. But in that safe, accepting space, they start to slowly open up. They feel their feelings, they start to own them, and eventually they accept responsibility. The whole journey is about moving from being rigid and closed off to becoming what Rogers called a fully functioning person, someone who's open to life and trusts their own evolving self.
So, here we are, decades after Rogers came up with all of this. Why is it still so incredibly important?
Why does it still influence everything from therapy to parenting to even how we think about leadership?
I think it's because, at its very heart, this approach is a huge statement of faith in us. It's this deep, optimistic belief in what the source material calls the noble human capacity to overcome hardship, pain, and despair. It's the idea that the expert answers aren't out there somewhere. They're already inside of us, just waiting for the right conditions to finally come out. So, what's the big takeaway here? If you remember anything, remember these 3 things. First, we all have that seed of potential inside us. We are built for growth. Second, that growth can't be forced. It has to be nurtured in a special environment of acceptance, realness, and deep understanding. And finally, the whole point of this journey is to learn to trust our own inner compass as the best guide to becoming who we truly are.
And that leaves us with one last question to take with you. Because these ideas, they're not just for therapists, they are for all of us. So the question is, in your own life, with your family, your friends, and maybe most importantly, with yourself, how can you create a little more of that environment for growth? How can you offer just a bit more genuineness, a bit more acceptance, and a bit more understanding?